Hello, welcome, wonderful watercolor artists. I'm Lisa Christensen, and I believe that everyone can learn to watercolor and that creating art and giving art is twofold joy. I teach watercolor to help others feel joy, and I want them to share that joy with others. Okay, so I am filming this right now. Peaceful snow is falling on a quiet world, and the cardinals outside my window are happily eating on my bird feeder. I love painting winter landscapes. They make for some beautiful and dramatic paintings that bring peace and love while I paint. And then that goes to the receiver. So what you see on my palette is I am mixing up this purpley beautiful color. I want it to be very indicative to the landscape that I see outside, and so I painted this. I got my paint ready and I'm ready. The line drawing is of that picture with that beautiful lacy tree in the winter background. It's going to be a really fun painting. I am doing a wash. This is a tea-like consistency, and I just put down like a layer of like purple, muted purple, and now I'm adding a little bit more blue to that purple. It's very liquid. It's like a tea-like consistency, so it's going to dry very light, and I'm just doing that to get it started, and then we'll start on the real painting as we go along. But I love cobalt blue and alizarin crimson. It makes for a really fun sky. All right, so I'm going to clean up a little bit more, and I want a bit more yellow, and I want blue. I don't want it to be mixed with green, so I'm adding this beautiful like muddy blue green color. But it's gonna look beautiful. So I'm doing this is still the background, and I want it to be very, very light. And so I am adding water when needed. And I just want this bluish, greenish for the background. It's really the background. And I'm using a nice big brush, and I'm just kind of going in. I'm figure skating on the paper, so to speak. And then I'm going to take a clean, damp brush, and I'm just going to move that watercolor all around because I want it to look like it's just faded into the background, which is what I'm doing, what you see here. Now I'm adding that beautiful darker purple, and I'm just adding water, a damp brush to smooth out the lines so we get that beautiful edge happening. And that is going to I'm going to be done with the sky in the background. For now, I'm going to work on my foreground where the snow is, so I want it to be a lot lighter than my sky. And as I'm doing that, I'm adding just a little bit of cobalt. Like there's very little cobalt, lots of water, just enough to suggest that there's a little bit of form on the landscape. And because I use just a little bit of that cobalt and a little bit of that alizarin crimson, I can go in and just, I'm not going to make green. It's just going to be this beautiful like farmland sort of snow-covered farmland texture that I have going on. All right, so I'm about ready to start on my main tree, and I'm getting it wet, and I'm going to use a darker shade of purple for this. I'm going to start with the tree trunk, because I always like to grow my trees from the base and then go from there. And you'll just see I'm doing a wet into wet. This is just the primary foundational shape of the tree, and then I'll go back in with all the detail and do a more concise job of it. All right, so my liquid is a little bit thicker at this point, and that's okay. That's how I wanted it to be. I can also start adding tree limbs to the tree. All right, now that the background is dry, I can go in and get some details. I'm also going to start doing the same thing with the other tree, but I'm pretty loose. This is in the not background, but distant in the foreground, so I don't have to be as precise. And so I'm just getting a wet brush and just kind of cleaning up my edges. I don't want any crisp edges at the moment, And I'm also adding a little bit of, I'm doing the same thing with that tree. I want it to be very frosty-ish looking, so I don't want a whole bunch of edges at this moment, but I will in a little bit. I'm also going to be working on the shadows of my tree, and the shadow is on the left side, so you'll see a little bit more on the right. I'm just adding a little bit. With the shadows, with snow, you want just a little bit. You just want to indicate that there's a shadow. You don't need very much. So a very tea light, a tea consistency with light value. And you notice how I did not go all the way to the horizon line because I wanted my painting to feel like there's a lot of snow and that there's a shadow, but there's also snow. So it's just a practice of knowing how dark do I want it to be. And I'm going to make my horizon line a little bit darker. In the source photo, what I'm painting is a hedge, and that's what that is. And I wanted that green gray consistency again. This painting is very gray, but it's really a beautiful, I love the grays in the winter. I think it's wonderful, and I truly believe that when we paint with grays, we can really make our colors pop. And so, anyways, so I'm adding a little bit more grass. I'm using yellow ochre and cobalt to make that like greeny, grayish yellow. And then I'll go in with more of a purpley color to really gray up and make the grass stand out. I love painting grass. I just flick it. This is double speed, but I'm just flicking my brush up and growing my grass, so to speak, almost like a gardener would. But instead I'm painting with a paintbrush. Yeah, and so I go back and forth, the push and pull with yellow ochre, and then that violet purpley with a little bit of alizarin crimson and yellow with the cobalt. And it makes for some beautiful grays. I love painting winter for all of its beautiful grays that we have. As I'm painting, this is a perfect time to remind you guys to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I produce content about every week. I try to be very considerate of your time and produce content that is helpful and meaningful in your watercolor journey. All right, so for the trees that I am going to paint, which I find very relaxing, is I am going to start with the branches, and it's almost like I'm doodling. I love to draw branches, and it's just in little V's. So I'm making little V's everywhere. But I'm also looking at my source photo and seeing where the branches go. Do they go up? Do they go down? Are they on do they go more on the sideways? Like, how are the branches working? And then I decide how to paint them. It's a very intuitive process, but the more you can draw trees or paint trees, the better your trees are going to look. And what I'm doing is I'm getting that beautiful mix of that muddy purple, and you'll see me add some more cobalt because I really needed more paint for this, but I wanted it to be thick and I wanted it to be very gray, and right now I had a lot of orange but no cool colors, so I needed some more blue to go with it. But it's very thick. You can see that this is almost like acrylic type paint, like it's very, very thick paint. I wanted the branches to really stand out, and I needed it to be thick because I'm going to be using a wet brush just to move the pigment on the paper. So this is just I would say this is my third layer for my tree. And at this point I'm flicking my brush, and it's almost like I'm growing grass, but instead I'm doing little V's along the way. Okay, and then you'll see me pick up a very clean brush with no pigment on it, just water, and it's damp. It's not even wet really, it's just damp. And I'm moving that pigment all around, and that gives me a lace effect, which I really, really love. And I'm doing that for all the branches that I've been working on. when I feel like I did a good enough job in a section, I go to the next section and I repeat the same process. I'll paint my little branches, and then with the extra paint that's on the paper, I will move my brush around, my clean, damp brush, to get more of those lacy branch look. And you'll see how I'm doing it right here. It's just like I'm flicking, and I'm being very strategic where I go, but I'm also not thinking about it too much. I do feel like this is a very intuitive practice, and so the more that you play with it, the better you're going to be. All right, and you'll see that I add some pigment, and then I use my clean damp brush, and I go back and forth, give and take. And then eventually you get the shape of your tree and you're in good shape. I did the same tree in the background the same way. All right, so as I am finishing up this, for the leaves, this is like an oak tree that doesn't lose their leaves until new growth comes. And so that is what that tree is. And now I wanted to add some cardinals to the tree in the foreground. And so that is what you're seeing me do. You're going to see me play around with the shape. Usually when I paint cardinals, I do a dot, and then I will add a tail, and then a little triangle at the top of the dot. It's a whole thing. Anyways, it's very simple, but it really works well for impressionistic type of paintings. But I decided I did not love those cardinals, so I'm going to go back to it once it dries. And lately I have been having 11 cardinals at my bird feeder, so I'm actually going to paint a couple more cardinals before we're all said and done. But there's the circle, there's the little tail, and then a little triangle at the top. And I would repeat that over and over again, about 10 times. Anyways, other than that, I feel pretty good about the tree. I am adding a little bit more blue. I wanted it to be a bit more cooler, and I felt like with the red, it was just kind of making it look more purpley and muted. So I added a little bit more blue just to give it that cool side of things. And then I can call it done. I signed it, I was happy with it, and there's the finished painting. Anyways, if you found this to be at all helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel, and share joy by painting and creating something that you love to give to somebody that you love. Anyways, you'll find peace and joy while doing that, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for watching.